Hi, welcome everyone to the first talk of our CIM MES 21-22 season, and welcome again. We're very fortunate to have Mr. Bryan Coates with us for our first talk of the year, and he's going to share a very fascinating story about Bre-X and the inside story, and it's something still many years later, it still generates a large crowd and a lot of discussion. Before I turn it over to Bryan, I'd also like to welcome Nathan Stabina from the CIM Foundation. And Nathan, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen for the audience. Tell me if you could see that. Is that good, David? Okay. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Nathan Stabina. My day job is with Shared International, and in my spare time, I'm on the chair of the CIM Foundation's fundraising committee. Now, throughout the year, the Management and Economic Society of the CIM, or MES, offers quality presentations free of charge, and today's lecture is in partnership with the CIM Foundation. This lecture is being taped, and with Bryan Coates' guidance, we will edit it and then post it to the CIM Academy so that it can benefit the mining community, students, and researchers for years to come. At the end of this presentation, we're going to invite you to donate to the CIM Foundation. Your donation will be used to post the presentation, and the remaining funds will be shared 50-50 with MES and the Foundation to support our respective educational programs and scholarship funds. You'll receive a full receipt for CRA income tax purposes. We're going to email you the Foundation's website homepage at the end. And if you're not able to get that, it's very easy. It's cimfoundation.ca, CIM Foundation, all one word, .ca. It's going to bring you to a Donate Now page. And then from there, we're going to ask you to click on the scholarship button so your donation can go to the card for scholarships. We truly hope that you're going to be generous, and we hope that you enjoy Bryan's presentation. You're in for a real treat. Bryan rarely gives this presentation. I think he's only given it a handful of times. So please welcome to the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. So I'll give a very quick introduction to Bryan. He's a longtime mining executive in the global mining sector. He's been with Osisko Royalties as they developed their royalty portfolio to be among the largest in the world. And prior to Osisko Royalties, he worked with Osisko Mining Corporation as Chief Financial Officer, Vice President, as they built the Canadian Malartic mine into one of Canada's, or I think it is Canada's biggest gold mine and one of the largest gold mines in the world. And without further ado, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Bryan Coates. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to congratulate the Ontario and Valley's mine rescue team for bringing to surface the 39 workers in an incident that happened on Sunday and Monday. I think it's an outstanding achievement and a great outcome. And it shows the system works and that we operate responsibly and in a safe manner. So I think it's a great example of that. The second item I'd like to say is not with great pride that I stand before you today or share with you my thoughts today on an event that marked our industry. I joined Bre-X on September 1st, 1996, right in the period where it was in heavy discussions with a number of parties. I joined to look after the financial sector. I was recruited by Rolly Francisco, who was EVP. I participated in helping on the structuring the transactions that were proposed to us. as well as I was charged with negotiating the joint venture agreement with Freeport, and subsequent to Michael de Guzman's falling out of the helicopter, I participated and led the efforts on the investigation. I'll start with sharing my screen here. Sorry, it'll be a little challenging for a little guy like me. All right. So the title of today's talk is The Bre-X Story, an Insider's Perspective. What I'm going to try to do today is explain to you what happened and in the environment it happened. I'll discuss the new measures established to avoid reoccurrence, talk a little bit about the personal impact, and the lessons learned. This, I think, is the 6th or 7th time I've given this presentation. The first time was following my daughter taking a financial control class at the University of Ottawa, where her teacher was talking about Bre-X fraud, etc. And she went up to him at the end of the class and said, my dad worked at Bre-X. So he says, would he be interested in coming in to talk? So that was the first time in 20 years I talked about it. In the front row was my mother, who at that time was 97, who's past 100 years now. But it was the first time she heard the story. So pretty impactful. Okay. So Bre-X was one of the most important frauds in the mining and financial sectors. You got to remember that the company had a market cap of over $6 billion. And I'm talking about in 1996. So today that would be probably double that. It was an acquisition target for a number of large gold mining companies, including Barrick, Placerone, Freeport, Tech, and Rio Tinto. We were looking at a deposit that had plus 70 million ounces of gold in Indonesia. Bre-X was a junior exploration company. Kilbourne, who later was acquired by SNC-Lavalin, issued a report on the reserves and pre-feasibility study. The whole story is of international suspense. There was espionage, potential corruption, disclosure issues. You got to remember that this story was on the news on a nightly basis and cover page of the Financial Post, as it was known in those days, and the Globe and Mail, and a number of other newspapers. It involved a number of world-class advisors, ranking from JP Morgan, Republic National Bank, RBC, Bennett Jones, Sullivan Cromwell, PwC, KPMG. And wherever there's always a little bit of intrigue or trouble, Kroll usually shows up, and they were part of this, and a number of other advisors. Naturally, this is also a story that mining analysts followed and made a positive recommendation. Lots of Canadian and US investment houses and brokers were involved. The fraud was discovered during Freeport due diligence process, whereby they were unable to replicate the drill results. We mandated Strathcona Minerals, Graham Farquharson and his team, to examine the allegations. They carried out a $1 million program. They issued their report on May 4th, 1997, a Sunday morning, where Graham walked in and dropped 2 hockey bags full of reports. And he said, I'm going for a walk while you guys read it. And his big item was, regretfully, there's no gold. As you can see on this is Graham's letter that precedes the report. And I've highlighted that his comment, we very much regret having to express the firm opinion that an economic gold deposit has not been identified in the southeast zone of the Busan property and is unlikely to be. The other part that I would highlight is the last sentence. However, the magnitude of the tampering with core samples that we believe have occurred and resulting in falsification of the assay values at Busan is of a scale and over a period of time and with precision that, to our knowledge, is without precedent in the history of mining anywhere in the world. So that gives you a little bit of the context. You see the share price graph. Pretty amazing story that comes to a crashing halt on May 5th. I would say a comment here that there was probably more money made and sports cars bought as a result of trading post Michael de Guzman falling out of the helicopter than that pre-event. So it's kind of amazing. Everybody played, everybody had a theory. You know, I asked somebody, you know, once somebody has fallen, the chief geologist has fallen out of the helicopter, why would you buy the stock? Somebody answered to me, I buy lottery tickets too. So pretty amazing period, but pretty telling also about the whole story. There's been over 6 books published. And you've got the list there. Obviously, I've read all of them, some many years ago, and every time I give this talks, I have to pull out. There's been numerous articles in newspapers and magazines from Canadian Business, Maclean's, Fortune. The Fortune writer, I think is Richard Bahar. He was pretty lucky because he went to Indonesia in January of 1997, interviewed a number of people, came back, and because he caught malaria or was ill, he delayed the issuance of his article. And in the meantime, the whole story began to unravel. So some people get lucky sometimes. A movie, Gold, that was issued in December of 2016, starring Matthew McConaughey as the president of Washoe Mining. So kind of interesting. Again, another one, just for some color. One of the theories by one senior executive of the company was that when we learned of that there was no gold in Red Graham's report, someone suggested that we could sell the movie rights to repay the investors. So we've got a big fraud here, but I think whenever you look at fraud, it's important that we understand the context. So I'm going to walk you through the environment at that period of time. So we're in a high-risk industry. Obviously, the volatility of the commodity prices, project execution. We deal with estimates. This is what people sometimes wonder. And we talk about wealth distribution. It's an industry with companies of various size. It goes from prospectors, junior exploration companies, to operating companies as junior producers, intermediate producers, and senior producers. And it's also an industry in liquidation. The minute that you open up a new mine, you're starting to deplete these resources and you're companies are always chasing with the challenge of having to replace what they mine, and it's always a little bit more challenging to discover new resources than it is to mine them. So we've got risk capital that is provided to search for a deposit and usually leads to the sale or for a joint venture for the development once a discovery and the project is advanced to development. It's an open industry, ease of entry, particularly at the finding stage. There's tremendous amount of money required to develop mines. To add to the challenges faced in our industry, we mine resources whose ownership is a collective asset or state-owned or belongs to the people. It's a fascinating industry with colorful characters, players, and participants. There are many stories of rags to riches within our industry. The relations between prospectors, promoters, and senior management of large companies and of investment houses is unique. And each world-class discovery has its intrigue and usually is subject to litigation. So I want to take you back into the 90s. Robert Friedland, through his sponsorship of Diamond Fields, discovered Voisey's Bay. He was looking for diamonds and discovered a significant world-class deposit. Mr. Friedland was the CEO, very colorful, exceptional promoter. However, in the early 90s, his reputation was tarnished through the environmental incident at Summitville and subsequent bankruptcy. Just to give you the impact is that some of you may remember that his assets were seized, his proceeds of Diamond Fields were seized by the EPA and was the subject of litigation as a result of that. So great discovery there. Diamond Fields basically, Freeland basically auctioned the company, brought in the leaders in the nickel industry, Inco and Falconbridge, and got them in a bidding war. And Teck already had 10% of the company and was also participating in the bidding war. But here's somebody that, you know, nobody wanted to associate with, who now had found a deposit and had the largest companies begging him. And he sold it to Inco, that was led by Michael Sopko at the time, for $4.3 billion. That is really the value creation at the drill bit, but that tells you what had happened. Basically sold the property for $4.3 billion from an exploration program. And here's the stock price, stock chart that covers the period of 94 to 96. Again, tremendous amount of wealth created. The other one that I like to highlight is the sale of Arequipa Resources, discovery of gold deposit, the Purina Deposit in Peru, which became one of Bre-X's great mines for producing for over 20 years. And that was sold for $790 million in 1996. And again, and then you get to see the $1.1 billion Canadian value there in the stock chart. So again, positive environment for gold and value creation on that. So let's go to Indonesia. In 1996, Indonesia was one of the most difficult jurisdictions from an ethical standpoint. President Suharto led the country. I was asked during my testimony at the SEC if it was a democracy. I was obviously unqualified, but I think that the questions that would that been a dictatorship at that point in time? His wife was known as Madame 10%. I don't think it's because she was tipping 10% when she was at the restaurant, but more that participated in 10% of the companies, foreign companies that were coming in to Indonesia. There was a lack of transparency within the system, and there was a fair amount of corruption amongst the bureaucrats and technocrats. One example of that, and this led to his discreditation during the Bre-X process, was Minister of Mines Sujana at that time, who transferred from state-owned coal company $29 million to his account. And in an investigation, he was asked why, and he suggested that he didn't want the bureaucrats to waste it. So that tells you a little bit of the environment that was in Indonesia. The country had world-class deposits. Grasberg, Inco had PD Inco operating over there. Newmont's Batu Hijau, all of those were sort of in the process. In Canada, we have limited knowledge, I would say, about Indonesian mining. So the whole environment that I would comment would be favorable for fraud. And when we look at the plausibility of having an outstanding ore body, I think about Grasberg. I mean, it's for miners, it's a wonder of the world. Great operation, tremendous mineral endowment, with lots of challenges with respect to that, to the operations, the successful operations. Okay, so now we come to the Busan Project. So world-class deposit, 70 million ounces of gold. Production was estimated to be less than $100 per ounce. There was some studies, I think it was the study from Lehman Brothers of Dan McConvey that was looking at a production rate of 4 million ounces per year. So do the math, if it was operating today and it maybe double the price to $200 an ounce, it would just be a cash flow generating machine, printing machine. So it was located in a region that was not well known. You got to remember that Indonesia is the 14th largest country as far as area. It's the fourth, was the fourth most populated in the world, about 270 million people. You know, there's hundreds and hundreds and thousands of islands that form the country. So again, region where the Busan discovery was not well known. It was promoted by David Walsh, who had a history of promoting companies in Montreal and in Calgary. On the geological side, John Felderhoff was one of the co-discoverers of Octetti, so credibility there. And there was a group of Filipino geological team led by Michael de Guzman, who has been portrayed as a super intelligent geologist with some good background. All of those players were not well known in the North American mining industry. Plus, to add color to the whole thing, there was some pretty colorful other members that are more known in Australia and in Europe, with Willie McLucas and Dr. Maruk in Indonesia, etc. So Bre-X was a new company, junior exploration company that has success. It started off as a family business that was actively promoted. You know, basically looking to fund their next drilling campaign and to keep alive, like many of our junior companies today are trying to do. The operations, we have a comment in French, were a bit proche à foin, meaning disorganized, but not unusual for a family junior exploration company. Legal and financial aspects, not always the best practice, but getting through. And as they progressed through the successful chain mining of creating value, they were looking for credibility and added senior management and directors, such as Rowley, Dr. Paul Cavanaugh, myself, if I may humbly say myself, as to add some credibility, and also bringing on new advisors, Bennett Jones, KPMG, and a number of investment banks. So increasing the acceptability and the credibility within the capital markets and the mining circles. For the Canadian and US investment banks, this was a great story. It was a major discovery. Everybody wants a piece of the pie when you have a successful enterprise. And the analysts wanted success. Again, think of the context that we're coming off from Voisey's Bay, we're coming off from Arequipa. So basically, Bay Street wanted this to happen. They were looking forward to it to happen, and it would be, they wanted to celebrate another entrepreneurial success. And whenever you get lots of money involved, greed steps in, and it gets its factor heightens as the dollars increase. So with the exploration success, Bre-X became highly desirable company. Barrick had initial discussions in 1993 and continued to follow the file. Placer Dome came in during the period of Bre-X looking for a partner. Tech was very interested. Freeport was in Indonesia, and there were a number of other parties. September 1996, the board mandated Rolly Francisco and the senior management to find a JV partner, and hired JP Morgan and Republic National Bank at that point in time to assist them in finding a great partner. Lots of pressure for an auction, and it became so big that the Indonesian government was front and center of all of this, became a pressure point. And this led to also a little bit of guerrilla warfare for those of you that have been in hostile takeovers or intrigues or pursuing success, there's no stone left unturned. So we got a lot of discussion on the history of the property, how it was transferred, and gave the opportunity for a number of government officials to participate in the process. So if we look at the global mining industry in '96, you had in South Africa Goldfields, Anglo Gold. In Canada, it was Barrick, Placer Dome, Teck, Cambior. US had Newmont, Homestake, Freeport. Australia was doing some gold mining through Rio Tinto, and Rio Tinto was doing mining in gold there. Barrick was just coming off the acquisition of Black Minerals and the successful, operations in Nevada. They were well established in South America. through the LAC acquisition with El Indio, but also through Purina that they had acquired in Arequipa. Peter Monk, a great entrepreneur, wanted to be number one. And he certainly pursued that on the Bre-X file. And if you look at his board of directors and his advisory board, there were some pretty senior people, world leaders in there, so that they were well equipped to negotiate anything international. So again, if you look, a tremendous amount of pressure that was ongoing at that period of time. Number of the companies that were seeking Bre-X to on a merger or a joint venture partner. There was the investment bankers that were trying to see how they could participate in all of this. For the press, great story. Every day there was something new. I mean, I lived in Calgary at the time. My big decision was, do I go to bed before reading tomorrow's newspaper, because it usually comes about 11 o'clock at night, or this was in the days where there was papers, obviously, or do I wait till tomorrow? And if what would usually happen is I would wait for the papers, and if there was something, it would start the clock on the number of faxes exchanged with Rolly Francisco, who was in Indonesia, and then the lawyers, etc. So not much sleep that I could get those days. Obviously, the investors, both the large retail component and also institutional component. And you know, when you get a $6 billion market cap valuation in 1996, that means all major institutions have to be in your stock. You know, two major governments, the government of Canada, obviously feeling pressure, being lobbied by companies, as well as the government of Indonesia, seeing this happening on their land, but also becoming a world event that's being reported in the Wall Street, the New York Times, as well as the various financial press around the world. So lots of pressure for Bre-X to do a deal for the development of property, looking for a world-class operator. Intense lobbying efforts to position bidding companies for success. Obviously, relationships with the government, but tremendous amount of pressure on advisors. You know, there's been some pretty hefty discussions that were held with those that were representing Bre-X at the time, some threats about future work, etc. There was a number of attacks on Bre-X reputation. On the other hand, it was also a story of David versus Goliath, a captivating story for media and industry players. You know, lots of intrigue, stuff being leaked in the papers, you know, all of a sudden issues relating to permits, lawsuits regarding to former owners trying to come in to play. And there was all, you know, a large contingent of retail shareholders which were vocal, who highlighted some of the issues that they had, and they were afraid of not being paid fair value. So it was really a coalition against certain companies. So lots of folklore happening. The government gave us deadlines to do deals. For the government of Indonesia, they were at the center of the negotiations. The Minister of Mines held a number of meetings. The Bre-X representatives were called to a meeting with the Minister of Mines. Sitting beside the Minister of Mines was Mr. Monk at the time. They were acting as facilitator. They they were encouraging Bre-X and giving Bre-X deadlines to do a deal with Barrick. And the Secretary General of the Mines Ministry, Umar Saeed, gave a deadline of 8 days to have this discussion. And in those days, they would just say sign. And at that point in time, our representatives were saying that they can sign because they had to go get the board approval. So corporate governance played save the day at that point in time. So obviously this became bigger and bigger and included, had to include President Suharto. Tremendous amount of external pressure. And other key players started coming in. Bob Hassan, who was a golfing partner of the president and confidant, who also was a member of the Olympic Committee, the International Olympic Committee, became involved, as well as Freeport, giving their their operations in Indonesia. And Jim Von Moffitt was one of the trios that played golf with President Suharto and Bob Hassan. So again, lots of issues related to the mining titles, contract of work that was involved with the bureaucrats, lots of discussions between Bre-X and the government. And again, a whole bunch of stories on international press, intrigue, lots of challenges to reputation. And it became, I would say, an embarrassment to the Indonesian government that this was going on and the focus that was going on. A number of newspaper reports and articles, Canadian Business. I invite you to read that if you want some more color. Here's one man that played a key role. He was a technocrat, Contoro, educated at Stanford, one of the professional person in the Department of Mines, credited to turning around the Indonesian tin mine, state tin mining company to profitability. He was asked to do things and refused to revoke our contract of work, which is the contract that outlines not only your tax status, but your investment proposals and your investment protection. He refused and he was stripped of his duties. But he was key in upholding the laws in the country while he was certainly during his tenure. So all of this was going on. There was a lot of pressure, lots of negotiations with the government. And in October of 1996, we disclosed publicly an agreement between Bre-X and Panitan Duta, which is the Panitan Group for Advisory Services. The group was owned by the son of President Suharto, Sigit. And again, the mandate, and we disclosed this all in a long press release, that a memorandum of understanding was to basically help us as consultant to assist in administrative, technical, and other support that may be required in the Republic of Indonesia, including the identification of issues, acquisition of exploration and development and production from mineral resources, etc. So we went public with this. We even disclosed the terms. It was a pretty hefty contract when you looked at it. 40 months at $1 million per month. Basically gave Panitan Duta, I should say, 10% of Busang as a carried interest. We would provide financing for acquisition of other participations. Also, a service company would be set up to supply various services such as utilities, petroleum, etc., to the project, and it would be held 60-40 between Bre-X, and we had an associated company at that point in time, Bre-X, and Penitent Duta. So again, but the key aspect here is what you gotta remember is this is something we disclose. Why did we enter to this strategic agreement? You know, we were severely criticized at the time. I remember a Globe and Mail editorial highlighting how incompetent we were for doing such a move. That if a senior company was doing this, they certainly would not be entering into strategic alliance like this. We did it because a few days later, it came out publicly that Bre-X had contracted a daughter of President Suharto, Tutu, as an advisor. So again, when we judge things, particularly when we're far, it was kind of interesting to read all the nice things the Globe said about us. And then when it popped that Bre-X had Tutu as an advisor, people started to understand. So we made this a family affair that would get settled, I guess, around what we hope was the Sunday dinner table. Again, you know, for us as an industry, this is something that we face on an ongoing basis. And, you know, you can take a look at the ethics behind this, the extortion. You know, some would say there's some extortion there. Some would say, is this corruption? You can look at justification. You can also question your fiduciary duty to protect assets for the company. So very, very, again, very intense. One of the key pieces of advice that we got was, and we strongly believed in this, is that if we were going to enter into this contract, we were disclosing it. And that's great advice that we got. Obviously, key points in the negotiations with Penitent Duta, but obviously quite happy. And obviously, it's something that, you know, certainly was great to have done. Not to have entered, not necessarily to enter it, because we got a whole bunch of questions related to it, but at least it was disclosed. So, as I described, following lots of pressure from the government, early in the new year, we had some movement. Hassan bought a part of the company through the local holding companies that were not associated to Bre-X. He became more involved. Things started to basically revolve around him. And basically, which led to the disclosure of a joint venture between Bre-X, which had a 45% interest, two Indonesian companies, which held 30%, including Bob Hassan. Would have, I think it was 15% he had. The Republic of Indonesia maintained 10% ownership, and Freeport 15%. Freeport had deep knowledge of the country, close ally, friend of President Suharto, and basically Freeport and Hassan were mandated by the president to clean up what had been going on and to get the country moving again on the mining front. So So this happened on in mid-February. Freeport then, Freeport's agreement was subject to due diligence. Freeport executed due diligence activities. They were unable to reproduce the drilling results. They contacted Bre-X representatives during PDAC to say what's going on here. We can't find the gold. And David Walsh at the time said he looked after the money. Felderhoff said that there were mistakes that can be. Michael de Guzman was mandated to return back to Indonesia and to explain what was going on. In the meantime, I left PDAC to fly to New Orleans and was continuing to negotiate the terms of the joint venture agreement without any indications that there were problems. The Guzman went back through Hong Kong and then into Indonesia, had medical studies, appointments, then went up to the site, and on his way to the site, he falls out from the helicopter. Was it suicide? Was it murder? Was it disappearance? Who knows? I learned of this when I checked into a hotel in Toronto, coming back to Toronto to meet with Freeport representatives on the JV. As I arrived to the Hilton in Toronto, this was the days of pink message slips, so I had a big pile checking into the hotel, and I subsequently discovered that about the Guzman's fall, and spent the night with Rolly Francisco at a Tim Hortons discussing about what was happening, what could have happened, and how do we proceed. At that point in time, Rolly asked me, is this for real? And I said, mesmerized by it all. And the only person I told him that I would trust in this mandate would be Graham Farquharson. So the next morning we had a board meeting. Obviously, we had to disclose the facts that the Guzman had fallen out of the helicopter. And then we had to get through our board that Strathcona be retained, which we got the mandate to do. And we'll call Graham. Lucky to have him in town because he was certainly somebody that was there. I'll always recall the meeting that we had in Bennett Jones's office. John Sabine was there, Rolly Francisco, myself, and other representatives from Bennett Jones. Graham came in with Hendrik Tallenhorst. I believe Hendrik had an arm in a sling because he had a broken wrist or some damage to his arm. Graham took off his sports coat, sat down, short sleeve shirt, pocket protector, and I asked him, if he had any conflicts about Bre-X. He had no conflicts. What did he know? He said all of the things that I read in Northern Minor. So we explained to him the situation, and we asked him to go to Indonesia and see what was going on. During that meeting, and it's reported in a number of books and newspaper articles, one of the questions I asked is, Graham, is this his fault job? And he said, Bryan, highly unlikely, too big. So Graham goes the next day to, which was a Friday, to a board meeting at Cambure in Montreal. I had known Graham through my days at Cambure. He sat on our board, and him and a number of his colleagues headed out. I think Hendrik went with him. Headed off for Indonesia on Saturday night flight. Landed in Indonesia. You know, they were armed with a number of reports that they read on the way over there. Got into Indonesia, went over to see to Freeport's office and got a debrief on what had been done. Graham called North America. He called me at 4 o'clock in the morning to basically say that it was the third call he was making to North America. He had talked to Rowley and told him that regretfully he thinks he has a problem. There's a problem there. He asked for a $1 million drilling program, which, by the way, I think ended up at $990,000. So he hit his budget on that. Rowley asked him to put it in writing. So he called his wife and dictated a letter, and he told me that she's on her way to the office to type up the letter. And he was asking me for security. So I said, "Are you okay?" He says, "No, for the core." So we had used some of the security forces that I had used in the past. So we mandated ex-SAS personnel out of London to basically go and help Graham supervise the core and the physical access to the core while he did his $1 million program. And as I said, the conclusion was no economic deposit, so very sad, the whole process. You know, when Graham called us that morning so that we had to make a press release on this, his strong indication was that this stock should not open up for trading. And Graham didn't want any grandmothers, any mothers, or whatever making any investments on that. So just to tell you, and then the whole saga went through international news, corruption, fraud, and lots trading on the whole aspect. Just to give you an idea, this is a picture that's an extract from the Fortune magazine article, a picture of the core. So there was lots there. John Fellerhoff pointing out some core. Here is Graham's report. Graham did a campaign of 12 twin holes. On the left is the Bre-X reported hole. On the right is Strathcona's hole. Pretty sobering when you look at that. Graham's comment, and you got to take a look, is Graham and 3 other individuals supervise the drilling operations 24 hours a day. And I think Graham had the day shift during high temperatures. But Graham's comment was that core was pretty hungry for gold. You know, one of the cartoons out of Northern Miner saying that all the visitors' safety glasses have been rose-colored, just an indication that sometimes we don't necessarily look for problems. And the impact of Bre-X was devastating in the market. I met people who I didn't even know, told me they were mad because I ruined their financing in Indonesia. It's pretty amazing, but the whole resource sector, but particularly the gold sector, came crashing down after the Bre-X incident. So when we look, and I'll go rapidly here, I've been a long time speaking. You know, how does this happen? Well, you know, there were some signs. Properties, previous explorer, no success. No splitting the cores. There's some salting of the samples. I mean, it was looked after that, you know, some of the gold origin came from panning or from rings. Alluvial gold used. Sample bags were open in a pool room. An unconventional assaying, fire assaying. Unconventional assaying, fire assay was not used, but cyanide soluble leach for 36 hours was the method. Key consultant, Ann Thompson on Petroscience. She had samples, she examined them, and out of 103 samples, I think none of them had gold. The Guzman's answer was, thank you, but we don't need your report, we've got your answer somewhere else. Normet, 90% recovery from gold. There was a fire also at the Busan Geological Office. Young Canadian geologists that were on a team questioned practices. And there was also a closed group of geologists at the site. You know, the Guzman and a number of other people that were close to him were in an inner circle. I was part of a presentation that I listened to, Bryan, and they're really grains and Strathconus red flags, but no geochem anomaly over deposit, no outcrop samples. This is a good one. We don't need to know the results of other spot drill holes. Let's just keep drilling. Next one is also very good. The geologist didn't go to site, to the drill site. You know, in 60,000 meters of core logging, no reports of visible gold. There was different methods of how you handle the samples. Samples were sent from Busan to Samarinda, where they were open to confirm core logging and to check for bag breakage. Of course. Despite a backlog of samples at Samarinda, at the Samarinda and the assay labs, no samples were shipped until they were authorized. You know, the mineralogical studies identified gold and metallurgical samples are as coarse rounded with gold-rich veins. Requests for drill holes exclusively for met tests were denied. They did not split the core. The whole core was required for accurate assays. And I guess that the interesting question was, when we step back, is could one deposit contain as much as 8% of the known gold reserve of the world? So, some red flags. I think Graham and his team had lots of time over the drilling campaign to think on how it all happened. So with that is, what did we do as an industry? And CIM was an active participant. There was a commission, a task force with the TSX and that. But we came up with National Instrument 43101 on new projects and new reserves with a QP required. And standards were established to protect investors and other stakeholders. And I won't go through, but basically we've got a world-class standard. Sometimes it's misunderstood because, you know, people believe this 43101 is almost a feasibility study. So we got some work to do, but we've got some improvements. But again, we've got a standard. So if you allow me, maybe take you through on some of the other aspects about fraud, include some suggestions on what I've learned. Sometimes it's too great too beautiful. You know, this was a deposit that was not only a geological drain, but it was a metallurgical drain. You know, so no issue. I think it's important also that professionals fulfill their obligations. And as a matter of fact, that all of the chain, as we can say, or the investment chain, or the funding chain, or you know, the mining chain, all professionals fulfill their obligations. I encourage you to know your business, your enterprise, to continue to strive for better standards. Boy, you know, it's good to have great advisors and management. It takes courage. It takes courage to listen to them also. But also sometimes advisors play their own games. Price Waterhouse hired FIA to conduct an investigation into, you know, who had done it or what were the issues. I ran the investigation, and interestingly enough, in some of Diane Francis's columns, I saw some details of things that we had discovered in our investigation through FIA. You know, when questioned, the former officer of the RCMP told me that this was a police method and that they exchanged lots of information with newspaper writers. To which naturally, being dumb Bryan, I asked, so what did we get in back? And there was lots of mumbling and no substance behind it, but it's part of the circle. The other part is important players don't always follow the rules. You know, one CEO was quoted as saying, as part of this process, you set objectives, your objectives cross other people's objective, you fight to win, it's war, you want to win. You know, in this whole ESG context that we have, it's a lot to reflect on, not only as directors, but as managers and as advisors. Let me share a little bit about my personal impact. When I joined Bre-X, we moved to Calgary. My family was welcome when we'd be at the grocery store, and they would ask us, because CP moved their rail line headquarters there from Montreal, and we were asked if we worked for CP because we spoke French within the family. I said, no, I work for Bre-X. Boy, they would almost carry my groceries to the car. I went from there to having phone calls of why there was a security over at my house 24 hours during part of the investigation. I had a young family, 4 kids, 3, 7, 8, and 10. Didn't know if I'd ever work. I faced the potential loss of my CPA designation. I had no financial gain, whether through trading options or shares. I was sued for hundreds of millions of dollars with no D&O coverage. When you're part of a $6 billion fraud, your personal safety, you think about that. I spent 2 days. I was the first to go in on at the SEC. I spent 2 days in Washington in the basement of the SEC's headquarters. I did 16 hours of testimony. Trust me, take my word for it. You don't want to go there. It was pretty tough. So I've been very fortunate because people helped me get another job, and I moved on to construct the Antamina project in Peru from 98 to 2001. I rejoined Cambior in 2001, sold it to IAMGOLD in 2006, and also had the great challenge and fun of participating in the development of Canadian Malartic, which is Canada's largest gold mine and probably one of the greatest success story in Canadian mining history. So it's been good. But there has been an impact on personal reputation, and that's for life. In disclosure, financing documents and that, I had to disclose that I was part of Bre-X for 10 years. You know, it's on my CV. I don't think it's the best thing to have on your CV. You know, you meet people, they're always a little bit suspicious, are you guilty? And that even comes not only from strangers, but from friends and family members. And, you know, while we were doing the public hearings at Canadian Malartic, the issue came up that there was a Bre-X guy that was part of the team. So it was quite an impact personally. So in conclusion, can it happen again? I think so. So I think we got to be extremely diligent. People do bad things. They do it in pursuing their dreams. Follow the case of Theranos. Elizabeth Holmes still searching for the magic formula, but she strongly believes that she has. The geological team at Busan felt it was there. They just, I guess at the end, hadn't found it yet. I think we always have to be cautious, be curious, and be vigilant. Respect your roles and your professions. Public confidence depends on it. I mean, you know, I'm in Montreal, so when I go over a bridge in Montreal, I certainly hope and I trust the engineers have done their work. When we look at mining projects, we certainly hope that all the professionals that are involved have done their work. Obviously, as I was preparing for this, and I've gone through a whole bunch of documents again, which caused me some sleepless nights. If you ever have a chance to get your hands on the Lehman Brothers report that was written by Dan McConvey on December 3rd, 1996, it has everything there, from discussions on why full core, metallurgical issues. It's right there. There's some issues. Naturally, in preparation for this, I had to review the movie Gold. And there's a great line in the movie Gold at the end. Kenny Wells, Matthew McConaughey, who's the CEO of Washoe Mining, says, "We weren't fooled. We just didn't look." And with that, I'll leave you with that. David, I'm open for questions if anybody has any. And thank you for your participation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brian. And that was a cool story, and to hear it from your perspective, from an insider's perspective, it's really, I've read some of those books and I saw that movie, but I mean, this takes the cake in terms of captivation and how fascinating the story it really was. And yeah, if people do have questions, there's about 20 minutes left. So if anyone has a question, we'd ask you to type it into the chat function, and then just because it's such a large group, it might get a bit unwieldy with people turning on their off their mutes and cameras on. And maybe while we wait, if anyone has one, I got one. I mean, was there a sense of the mining industry at the time? Like, was there any kind of sense from anyone or groups that there was something sort of too good to be true about it, or was it really kind of everyone just captivated into the, or kind of got sucked up into the story of it?
I would answer that, you know, the train left the station. There were people that didn't want to get onto the train, but as the thing kept on going, there was lots of questions that were asked. Some people were saying, well, are they is the Indonesian government trying to steal the deposit back? Is some of the corporate players trying to decrease the value of the deposit so there's an opportunity to get it cheaper? There was lots of question marks, but on the other hand, you know, it takes a lot of courage to be against it. I think after de Guzman fell out of the helicopter, voluntarily or involuntarily, I think there was lots of money that was made on short selling the stock. So yeah, there were some naysayers in there. There was some too good to be true. But most, you know, the momentum was that this was an outstanding discovery. Sorry, you're on mute, David.
Sorry, can you hear me now, Brian?
Yes, I can.
Sorry about that. Sorry, there was a question that came in, just if there was one of the 6 books, is there one that you would recommend more than the others, or are they all a bit different and telling a bit different story?
I think probably the most factual and most interesting would be James White and Vivian Danielson at Northern Miner, which covered the story with probably more of a technical aspect and more insights of known. The rest of the other ones have certain value, but were rushed to market.
Okay, thank you. Another question that came in was there ever any talk of just selling the asset instead of pursuing a joint venture?
I think the original aspect was to maximize value for shareholders. The joint venture was the most likely scenario. Once, and you know, we were under a CA agreement with Bre-X right when I joined in September. I think the challenge that became is that we fought for survival when all hell broke loose and we were getting hit by all sides. So I think anything was on the table, but we were trying to entice new parties to come to the table. There were obviously people trying to push their way in. So very interesting on those aspects there.
Thank you. Another question came in was, how were you able to overcome the reputational damage to kind of essentially start your career over?
Wow, I was helped by lots of people because when I look in October, November of 1997, there was not much hope. I was thinking that I would not be employed. I was very fortunate that people believed in me. I got to thank Louis Gignac, John Sabine, Graham Farquharson. These people put out the word that I had nothing to do with it. And a headhunter called me for to be CFO of Antamina and we spent 2.5 hours at the Calgary airport discussing. And at the end, I said, "Do you know who you're talking to?" I mean, I worked at Bre-X. And he said, "I've been trying to knock you out of this position for a number, and I can't because you've got people supporting you." Went to Peru, and you know, we decided this was a dream job and would be a great job, and we moved a family there. It was interesting. Graham Ferguson called and left a message at my home that I didn't have to worry. He had looked at the deposit and it was there.
Thank you. Another question here is, I guess it's kind of a question around who knew what when, and just around, you know, was it, I'll just read the question verbatim. Who do you think committed the reserve determination fraud, and who knew the reserves were straudulent in advance of the Strathcona report quoted at the outset?
Wow. That's like ask me who done it. Let me explain to you what I can tell you about the Bre-X story. And you know, every time we find out another little bit, tidbit of information, or from somebody that knew somebody or whatever. After 25 years, here's what I can tell you. I know what I know. I know what I did. And the rest is pure mystery to me. So, you know, some people have alleged that Mike de Guzman is still alive. I have no evidence that to believe that. On the other hand, if it happened, I'd be the least surprised person. So that's how I can answer that question.
Thanks. Was there ever any talk of, you know, if Freeport found the issues and told Bre-X about it, could Bre-X have kind of just ignored the results and sort of moved on to the next company lining up to?
No, I think that was pretty heavy. Just so, you know, because it's in the literature there. You know, Barrick had some samples and had difficulty replicating it in December of 1996. They didn't believe the results they had. CEO didn't want to believe that, you know, again, it was all part of the intrigue. So everybody sort of looked at it and said, really, wow, and moved on to the next thing. So that's an interesting part of that story.
Just looking here, I think. Oh, sorry, one more. What do you think is the fiduciary duty role of other senior management and brackets non-technical staff in terms of technical governance and due diligence?
Well, you know, again, it's part of being a team and having confidence in whoever that has all of those aspects there. But I think, you know, particularly as a senior leader in the organization, you have to understand what's going on and also what the processes are. So, you know, if you hear something, you've got to basically ask. But, you know, if you look at some of the various aspects, you know, bringing in an outside verification would be something that you know, would probably, I'd be looking at today. I would have certainly like to see what somebody like Graham would have thought about the project before. But again, the game's over, and I'm looking back and saying, should have done this, should have done that. But in your everyday life is that have good reporting, have good questions, use independent advisors, and you know, look at the various aspects, how you can strengthen your project rather than being scared of destroying it.
And sorry, I might have missed this, but was the Kilbourne, I don't know if it was a feasibility study or study of some kind, was it based on a resource estimate that they had done, or this was, I mean, who did the...
You know, there's a lot of discussions on that, but Kilbourne did do a report that calculated the reserves, the resources, and some pre-feasibility numbers. So, you know, the operating costs and things like that. So.
Oh, sorry. Question back to when you mentioned Bre-X. So, sorry, why do you think Bre-X didn't decide to believe the results of its sampling program? Why did it sort of bury its head in the sand?
Because, well, I mean, it's obviously only speculation on my side. I wasn't there. But I would have expected that somebody liked this project and wanted it and believed it was a trick. You know, again, it's like running a business that you're running out of cash. Some people say I'm going to hit the wall. Some others saying I'm going to pull out a rabbit. You got to really go back to the pressure that was cooking over this whole file. I mean, this was daily news. This was played on the national news in the evening. There was intrigue. There was, you know, geopolitical risk. There was espionage. You know, I met somebody that told me that they knew more about me than I knew myself. You know, these people, you know, when you get the Krolls of life involved, I mean, they listen to your talks, they go through your garbage, they check you out in various aspects. It's not fun. So I guess my answer would be that, you know, this through the whole process, what was fact, what was fiction, what was true, what was not, what were the rumors, what were not. You know, everything was going on. Half the people say this was being taken away, robbed. Other half the people saying, you know, we didn't belong. We're a bunch of crazy guys that the deposit should be taken away from us because we didn't know what we were doing. For example, you know, I highlighted the Panattan consulting agreement.
Well, again, I think we got to wrap it up there. It's just about 5 o'clock, and I just like to thank you again. It was truly an incredible story, and thank you for sharing it with us. And you know, it's one of those stories that needs to be told. And thanks to the CIM Foundation again. This was recorded, and it'll live on in the CIM Academy, and a reminder again, if you're able to, you can support the CIM Foundation by making a small donation, and it's fully, you'll get a charitable receipt as well. So thank you again, Bryan. Thank you, Nathan. And on behalf of the CIM and CIM MES and CIM Foundation, thanks to everyone for participating today.
Thank you and have a great day.